Welcome to Readers of the Pack. I'm Linda Mall. Started Readers of the Pack a year ago as a pilot, and here we are, absolutely loving it and continuing for sure. I'm also a founder of Accountability by Design, and this project is my passion for reading and growing leaders. And so I'm here to build a community of leaders who are readers, who love to learn through reading. And my co host on this program is Laura Haynes. And I'll let Laura introduce herself.
The two L's. Thank you, Linda. I appreciate that. My name is Laura Haynes. I am a lifelong learner. I was just having this conversation with Carolyn, an adventurous reader. And when I say that, I mean I'm not stuck on one genre. I do like to read different types of genres from a reading perspective. When I'm not collaborating with Linda on Readers of the Pack and Authors Speak, I leverage my sales and marketing experience and expertise in a fund development role with Autism Edmonton. I actually just joined that organization. I'm very excited about working with them and supporting their initiatives in the community to make us a healthier community and bring services to people that are essentially underserved. I also coach and mentor small business owners and entrepreneurs. That is a passion of mine. I can't look at something and think, how can I help you? Linda's also like that, so we have that in common. So I just want to get some housekeeping items out of the way. We invite you to save your questions. We have time reserved for you to have one-on-one time with Carolyn, which is pretty awesome, for the last 20 minutes of the call. But also feel free to put them in the chat at any time, and we will make sure that they get addressed if you're not comfortable voicing them live. But certainly we do encourage that. We do have a PowerPoint that we will be sharing. And on that note, I just got so excited about what I'm doing and I forgot to share the PowerPoint. This is what happens at Authors Speak. And that will include a full bio of Carolyn Stern, along with the link to the recording. And at the end of the session, we're going to send you a survey. We really do encourage you to send us feedback. We want you to help us develop this. This is for our community. And Linda said this earlier. We really believe that reading is a lost art. And there's so many amazing authors like Carolyn out there who are providing a message that can help you in either your professional or personal life. And I can attest to that because I've been a part of some pretty awesome conversations. Talking about Carolyn, well, Carolyn, I just want to say I was on your website this morning and it looks amazing.
Thank you.
I don't know if there's new branding, but it just caught my eye. It looks great. Carolyn is the president and CEO of EI Experience, an executive leadership development and emotional intelligence training firm, something I think this world needs. She is a certified emotional intelligence and leadership development trainer, professional speaker, author, and university professor. You are busy. So welcome, Carolyn. We really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
That's great.
Excellent. So, Carolyn, one of the foundational principles you lead with in the book is you can be emotional and strong. They are not mutually exclusive. I suspect there's many leaders who do not agree with that statement,
Yes.
particularly when I'm working in construction and manufacturing. Um, can you tell us why you believe this to be true?
Yeah. So I think the idea that strength means that we need to suppress our emotions is completely outdated, right? True strength isn't about ignoring feelings. It's about understanding them, processing them, and then using them effectively. And, we all have emotions. We're human, right? Why not learn to lead with them instead of against them? And in my opinion, we need leaders today who embrace their feelings, who understand themselves from the inside out. And this is leaders that know what they do and why they do what they do and are in touch with their emotional makeup. So Can you use the data that your feelings provide to help you make informed, rational decisions, especially when the stakes are high? That's the key, right? And so it's those leaders who express humility, who engage in genuine and caring conversations with people that they lead, and who aren't afraid to admit mistakes. Those are the leaders who are leading with their superpower, which is their emotional intelligence.
And I think that superpower that you talk about is obvious to probably everybody on this call, which is interesting. We always attract the people who believe in what we're talking about, right? But even those emotions are the one thing that unite us. That you very clearly talk about that in the book, that many of us are afraid of emotions in the workplace, even knowing that that's a uniting factor. Since COVID, there appears to be an even larger gap, I think we're all seeing, between what employees need and what leaders are prepared to deliver, and possibly are skilled to deliver. That's, I think, part of the equation. They don't know what to do with those emotions. What might be the first step for leaders to take to close that gap?
The first thing leaders need to do is, and this is why I call the book an inside out journey to transformational leadership, is you've got to look from within. In fact, true story, I wrote this. I wasn't writing this book when I first started. I actually wrote a book number two. And then I realized halfway through the book, I was writing the wrong book. I was writing a book originally about how to lead others. And I thought before we can lead others, we've got to lead ourselves, right? We've got to look at ourselves. So the first thing all of you on this call, I encourage you to do is practice building self-awareness. And so what that means is not only do we figure out what we're feeling, but why are we feeling what we're feeling? So I'll give you an example. Let's take frustration. What does frustration mean? What causes frustration? Well, frustration often stems from unmet expectations. A lot of times when I ask an audience like this, what's the difference between frustration and anger? It's like there's a deer in headlights. People don't know and how many of us, me included, have been frustrated or angry at work, but we confuse the two. Well, frustration, as I said, stems from unmet expectations. Anger stems from an injustice or an unfairness or in a violation. So you've got to determine what you're feeling and why you're feeling what you're feeling. And then once you do that, once you can get better at decoding your emotions, you can gain valuable insights into what they mean. And then, so if you can start thinking of emotions as data points, and when we listen to them, we can make better, more informed decisions. So that's one of the first things I encourage you to do in the book. And throughout the book, I ask you, what are you feeling? What is that feeling telling you about you, others in the situation? And then a question, if you're leading people, the best thing I always say, ask three simple questions. You don't have to be anyone's emotional therapist. Let's be clear, people. None of us are qualified. But what we can do is say, what are you feeling? What is that feeling telling you about you, others in the situation? And how can I support you? So that's the first piece.
Years ago, worked in an organization where ethics were an issue. And my work started to suffer because I was almost shut down so that I didn't get caught up in it, right? I protected myself by shutting down and finally realized what was happening. But if I'd started very early asking myself those questions, I would have been very clear about what I needed to do.
And Linda, you're not alone. I mean, listen, how many of us go through our day at work or at home and we're just like a little hamster in a wheel. We don't actually pay attention. So what the book asks you to do is look at yourself from above, almost like you're a director in your own film. And kind of looking from above, you take the emotional charge out of these situations and you can say, hey, what am I doing? What am I doing? What am I feeling? How is that feeling affecting how I'm showing up? And I'll give you a perfect example. And this is not a story that I'm proud of, but this is actually kind of a funny story that I hope that you'll all kind of learn from. So I'm a university professor, as Laura introduced me. And last year, about a year ago, 10 minutes before my last class, I got 3 emails from 3 different students. One claimed they were sick. The other claimed that they had a family emergency. And the final one, their dog ate their homework. And so, which I didn't even understand because it was a digital assignment. So, but anyways, I was pissed. I was angry. I've been teaching at the university for over 28 years, and I can smell a lie from a mile away. So I stomped into my class. And by the way, here's what's funny. I'm an emotional intelligence expert. It was an emotional intelligence class that I stomped into. And I sat at the back of the room with my arms folded, and I let the students feel my wrath. And I went into full drill sergeant mode. I started the class abruptly and I said, "Okay, Sally, you're up. Get to the front, start your presentation now." And they were terrified. One by one, my students nervously and sheepishly got up, scared to death, and presented their assignments. And my feedback, direct, harsh, critical, and I focused mostly on what they weren't not doing right, not on what they were. But then halfway through the class, I paused and I realized, wait a second, what am I doing? I'm angry at the wrong students. These are the brave ones that showed up to go to the class. I was mad at those 3 students that had sent me that email. And see, here's the thing. Dishonesty is an emotional trigger of mine. And even though I'm an emotional intelligence expert and I was teaching an emotionally intelligent class, let me be clear, I was not acting emotionally intelligent. And so when I took a step back and looked at myself from above, like I'm all sharing with you, and I pressed the pause button, I thought, what am I doing? I'm angry at the wrong people. So I took a deep breath and I did something unexpected. The first thing I did is I apologized. I said, "I'm sorry, class. I realized I came into this class angry and I've been in a bad mood since. Let's turn this class around and make this a great last class." Now, here's the thing. My students were shocked. They couldn't believe their professor publicly apologized and owned her mistake. Instead of losing their trust, I actually gained it. And so let me be clear. I teach university students. It's not like my students give me apples, right? Like it's not like I'm an elementary student. And if I get an apple from a university student, it's probably poisonous. Let's be clear. But on a Friday afternoon, when the class was supposed to end at 5:30, all 35 students stayed behind and hung out with the teacher for 35 minutes. It felt like I got 35 apples because they weren't going to let one moment in time define who I was as a professor, because for 13 other weeks, I was a kind and caring teacher. So the moral of that story is know your emotional triggers, ideally ahead of time, so you can be in the driver's seat of your emotions rather than them driving you. The second is pay attention to yourself, almost like, again, like a director in your own film, looking down from above. And third, and probably most importantly, when you make a mistake, apologize it publicly and work on doing better the next time. And that's what my book does. It takes people through a self-coaching model so that you can start to realize what are your strengths. You can gain awareness of what are your triggers. You can start to regulate your emotions, knowing how to regulate strong emotions. And then you can build great mutually satisfying relationships built on trust and psychological safety. And that's what the strongest leaders do. They don't just lead themselves. They don't just lead teams, they lead themselves first.
And those are great skills to take home too, right? Which is
Absolutely.
sometimes the hardest place for us to be in touch with our emotions when we get triggered by people we
Totally.
love, right?
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you also give a very interesting definition of inside out leadership. And I've used that term for years. but I'd love for you to share your definition because it was interesting for me.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, when we think of leadership, we think of leading people. But leadership isn't a job we do. Leadership, being a leader isn't anything different than being ourselves. So matter where you are in an organizational structure, we're bringing our life experiences, our personality traits, our beliefs, our attitudes, our values, our motivators, our stressors, etc. And, you know, when we start to focus on leading inside, right? Leading ourselves first. This is rooted in the idea that leadership isn't about managing tasks. It's about managing yourself, your emotions, as well as being aware of the impact. I call it the emotional wake that we leave behind. So we've got to be aware of our triggers. Had I known that dishonesty was a big trigger of mine before I got triggered, I could have been in the driver's seat. I could have said, hey, yes, I'm triggered by these three students who I believe are being dishonest, but I'm not going to let that affect how I show up for the other students who were brave enough to come to class. So it's about spending time developing our emotional skills. And these skills really come into play when leading others, right? It's inevitable that our emotions and those of others will affect how we feel at work. I mean, let's be clear. I want to say this, and I say this in the book, and I think this is a really powerful quote. How we feel affects how we perform.
Mhm.
So, how we feel at work and about the work we do affects how we perform at work.
So
I don't know
true.
about you, Linda, Laura, but when was the last time you were angry and that you communicated effectively to the people you were angry with? You probably didn't. You probably didn't. It clouded how your objectivity of how you saw them. It probably you weren't able to be cool and calm and collected when you were communicating with them. And so it's important to figure out how we feel. And that doesn't mean you have to make your employees feel good all the time. That's not our job. And sometimes, we tend to overvalue positive emotions and undervalue negative emotions, but both emotions provide us incredible gifts. I had one employee that I shared some constructive feedback with her, and she felt disappointed and sad. Well, guess what? The next day she improved her performance. So that's actually a good thing that she felt bad. Now that's not, I didn't want her to feel bad, but if me giving her some constructive feedback gave her an opportunity to reflect on herself and go, I'm not living up to expectations. I want to do something about that. So emotions are incredibly powerful to motivate people to do things differently. And my big issues in the workplace, we're not talking about them, and we
Mhm.
need to.
And not very different at the end of the day from Nate Rege's book, Compassionate Accountability, right? That we have to come with compassion. We need to be aware of emotions, all of that, but we also need to hold people accountable.
That's
And
right.
that's where that sense of fulfillment comes. And
Yes.
so that emotional intelligence is a prerequisite for all of that. So
Yes.
yeah.
And
And
for those people on the phone that have a lot of empathy, I talk a lot in the book about the dark side of all of these
mhm,
emotional intelligence skills. When you have too much
mhm,
empathy, you might get enmeshed in people's stuff. You might coddle them and keep them small. You might wear their emotional burdens on your shoulders. So you can have compassion for people, but still have boundaries.
exactly. And
Yes.
you must, and
Yes, you
you must
must.
to be
Absolutely.
successful. So I'm going to just you talk in your so there's a real workbook approach to this book, which I just absolutely loved, and I'm working through in personally right now. But I'm wondering if you can speak to that. It's a six-step process. I'd love for you to share that. I'm very aware of our time, but I think that's an important piece of this journey. What are the six
So the
steps?
first step is connect with yourself, which is
Right.
probably one of the most important steps. This is the step where I ask you to take a good, honest look in the mirror and accept where you are today. So you're going to identify the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? The second step is to consult with others. Now, as much as this step is so easy to skip, please don't cheat yourself. This was probably one of the most powerful steps to me because I asked 5 people, and I give you questions on page, I think 140 and 141. I give you 15 different questions to ask 5 different people, and you will be shocked at what the responses you hear. All of you in this room have blind spots. So once you reach out to these trusted friends, colleagues, and family members, you will ask them, how do you see me? Do you see me the same way I see myself? And then step 3 is you've got to clarify focus. Once you take your self-perception and other people's perception of you, you've got to define and assess what you want to work on. So what's the 1 or 2 or 3 goals you want to work on to be your best self? What kind of emotionally strong leader do you want to be? And then step 4 is you've got to consider your possibilities and barriers. What are the possibilities that you're going to act on? And I give you in chapter 10 60 strategies on how to improve your emotional intelligence. And then what are the barriers that are going to get you stuck, that are going to get you in your way of reaching your goal? And then step 5 is you've got to plan an action. Now, listen, I've been teaching for a long time, and I can tell you, changing behaviors is hard. It's not like it's a straight line up. It's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. And so what we do is we figure out how we're going to create an action plan in bite-sized chunks, and then coming up with goals like dates for completion so you know along the way. But also what I do in that chapter is I get you to consider a relapse prevention plan. What are you going to do when you relapse? And how do you get yourself back on track? And then the last step is you've got to confirm your commitment and close the conversation with yourself, right? This has been a 6-step self-coaching model. So not only are you going to commit to following through on your goals, but you're going to figure out, how do I establish accountability? And in my case, I have what I call competency advisors, people who are good at something that I'm not good at. And so my business development manager, who's half my age, is my independence advisor. Why? Because she's the most independent person I know, and that's an area that I really struggle with. I care too much about what people think. I need more validation than I probably probably should. And where does that come from? Well, I had a very overbearing mother who kind of did everything for me. So now as a 53-year-old, I struggle to make my own decisions. So in step 6, you find that accountability partner that can help you stick to your goals.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I'm sure there's going to be questions about that when we move into the chat. And Laura, I'm going to turn this over to you. I stepped right in and took over today.
That's okay. This is how we work together.
You want to ask the next question and lead us into the discussion?
Sure. Can you quickly identify the other 5 steps that follow connect with self in the framework that you've just spoken about? And I have so many questions for you.
So I did just identify.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Steps, but what I can do is I can dig deeper into step 1, which is, I think, what probably the readers or listeners will want to dig into. And step 1 is connecting with yourself, which is you got to take an inventory of your natural emotional makeup. So I'll be honest. I've already shared one of my wobbly bits. I struggle with independence. Right? I came from a beautiful mother who was a helicopter mom who kind of protected me from everything. And I never learned how to stand on my own 2 feet. I struggle with low independence, but I also have what I call, as I shared earlier, the dark side of flexibility. So what that means is I over accommodate. How does that show up in my leadership? Well, my employees take advantage of my generosity. Because I care so much about what they think, I tend to over accommodate. I'm overly flexible. I do what they want. And so what I need to learn as a leader, how to be a little bit lower my flexibility and be a little bit more stringent. And I need to increase my independence and not care so much about what they think. So in the book, I ask you to determine what's your EQ, your emotional quotient. So just like IQ measures cognitive intelligence, our EQ measures emotional intelligence, your ability to understand, manage, and use emotions effectively. So I dive into 5 areas of emotional intelligence. The first being self-perception. How well do you know yourself? Are you aware of your emotions, your strengths, and areas of growth? The second is self-expression, which is how well do you communicate? Are you open and assertive, or do you hold back? The third is interpersonal skills. Do you connect well with others? Do you know how to build strong, mutually satisfying and trusting relationships? The fourth is decision making. How well, I love this one because people think, oh, I make great business decisions. Yes, I'm not talking about business decisions. I'm talking about how well do you make decisions when emotions are involved? Do your emotions help or hinder your choices? Do you balance logic and feelings? And then finally, stress management, which we can all appreciate over the last 5 years specifically. How well do you handle change, the unfamiliar, and stress? So, how well do you handle pressure? Do you stay resilient and let your emotions overwhelm you? And so, in this book, in chapter 7, I get you to dig into all 5 of those areas that have 3 skills within each of those areas. And I get you to measure yourself on those 15 different continuums, and you're going to be surprised at where you measure up. Because, and now listen, unlike your IQ, which peaks at 18, our EQ rises as we get older. So we all have hope, right? We all can improve. But looking in the mirror objectively is hard. But I want you to do it without judgment. I could get mad and say, I wish I wasn't so needy. My fiance always says to me, you're the most needy 53-year-old I know. Yes, that's true. But why am I needy? Well, growing up, I got everything done for me. So I really don't know how to do things on my own. And up until this last year, I just lost my beautiful mother, but she did my laundry. She did my grocery shopping. I don't know how to do those things. By the way, my fiance now does them, so this is all good. I'm in good hands. But I've really grown up in a life that things were done for me. So I don't know how to kind of put on my big girl panties on my own. The challenge is, rather than blaming my family or blaming my mother, I need to kind of go, okay, this is the cards I've been dealt. Now what can I do about it? And that's the key.
Amazing. So much to unpack there. Thank you. So we're going to get ready to open up the conversation, Carolyn, and we have one last question for you. As you reflect on the disruption leaders face today, would your message be any different looking back and when you were writing this book and all of the thought that went into it?
Yeah. No, the principles of emotionally strong leadership remain the same. And in fact, the urgency for EI has only grown. So let's be honest, people, we're more emotionally charged, politically divided, right? We've got unprecedented levels of burnout, disengagement, and emotional exhaustion in the world ever. So this whole command and control leadership model just doesn't work anymore. So if anything, my message would even be bolder.
Yes.
Emotions aren't just nice to have in leadership, they're non-negotiables. And leaders who ignore emotions will lose their top talent, right? Leaders who embrace EI build high-performing teams, resilient teams that thrive. And if I could tell any business leader who's struggling to get the results they want one thing, it would be this: don't be afraid of your emotions, yours or others. Don't fear emotions, use them, understand them, harness them, lead with them, because leaders who will do that will be the ones shaping the future.
Great advice. Great advice. I want to open up the call to our participants, our lovely participants. Does anybody have a question that they want to start with?
I think we lost Laura for a few minutes. Oh, there she is.
I'm
We
here.
lost you again, Laura.
Oh
Froze.
dear. Any
So
questions
she
to
was
start?
opening up the floor to questions, right? Yeah.
I have a question. I'll start.
Sure.
You talked about the second step, which is going to 5 people in
Yes.
your network to
Yes.
get feedback. And I'm really curious about each of us will have our own perspective on this. I want honest, constructive feedback. Please do not tell me I'm doing great because no one's I'm not I know I need improvement, and that's just who I am. I don't think everyone is necessarily like me. So when I'm choosing those 5 people, how do I choose them? Is there a certain criteria that you think you should have? Um, Closest to you, someone you don't report to if it's in a work environment.
I think it's important to figure out who you're going to ask, but I also think it's important to do a preamble with what you just said.
Okay.
I mean, I'm all one of the things as a university professor, one of the things I do after every class is I ask people, what did I do too much of? What did I not do enough of? And what did I do just right? And that question, I used to say, did you like the class? And there were crickets, right? No one said anything. But it was the question I was asking. So when you ask a question, you're looking for them to tell you what you aren't doing right,
Yes.
what you could be doing more of, what you could be doing less of, what you could be doing, what you are doing just right. And so what I would encourage you to do is, Laura, when you're picking your 5 people, I would start with the person that's easiest, because I will tell you this isn't easy to listen to. It isn't easy to hear what people actually really think of you. And I would tell people, I don't want you to sugarcoat. I don't want you to tell me all the things I'm doing right. I also want you to tell me what I'm doing wrong. But I think ease yourself into this. You're going to hear things that are going to hurt your feelings.
Mhm.
But here's what I want to teach you all. You are bigger than whatever feelings you're going to feel. And so, as much as it hurts, feedback is a gift. It's not about feeling good or bad, it's about making us be better. And so, if we can look at it like that, it doesn't matter what's said, it's information. And you know what they say in all these 12 steps programs, which is take what you want and leave the rest. Start to look for patterns. If the 5 people all say 5 different things, that's a big awareness. Like, hey,
Mhm.
maybe I'm showing up different with my family than I am with how I show up at work. I don't know about all of you, but I was much more confident at work than I was at home. Why does that stem? Where does this stem from? Well, I was a late bloomer. I didn't have my first relationship until I was 27 years old. So I'm still insecure. I'm still like a teenager, right? In that stage because I didn't have experience. Whereas at work, I was on television when I was 12 years old. So I've been working for 41 years, right? I'm good at that. But we've all had our life experiences. So, how you show up in one area might not be how you show up in another area. That's why I encourage you to ask people in different parts of your life, not just in one area. Ask your direct report, ask a peer, ask your manager, ask a friend, ask your spouse. Ask your kids, ask your parents. All of these people are going to share something about you. In fact, I just did this in one of my EI classes at the university, and one student said to me, I asked the same question and I'm way too empathetic and I'm not empathetic enough. And I said, well, that's great. That's great information. Now, why aren't you being empathetic? What areas are you not being empathetic about? And what areas are you being empathetic about? That gives you a great amount of content.
That's great. Great feedback.
Mhm.
Gina,
Yeah.
go ahead.
I was actually just going to kind of build off of that, which is that, I run strategic planning sessions and I'm also a coach. And there's this crossover piece tool that I use that's called the stop, start, continue.
Mhm.
And I did that with my husband. We actually just
Ah.
did a 15th wedding anniversary trip, and we don't have kids for 6 days. What are we going to talk about? And okay, so what do
Love
I need
it.
to start doing for the next 15 years to be, to to be there, and what do I need to stop doing, and what do I need to continue
Love
doing?
it.
And yeah, it was a really interesting tool that went from the business. And just like you said, Carolyn, when I'm business, I am super confident, and
Yes.
then I'm this meek, okay, I've got to be the same person in both places. And vice versa. I have to be the same emotional person at work
That's right.
as I am.
And if
Yeah.
you dig into that, Gina, why are you less confident in your personal life? Is it like me that you're not as experienced in this? Like I know for me, and Sheila, who as I said earlier, we've known each other for years, so she knows this a lot about me. But growing up, I was a late bloomer. I mean, I didn't grow into my looks until I was much earlier. So I was this awkward teenager, and to this day I still don't feel I'm attractive. In fact, one time I was asked to be on the cover of a magazine and I said no because I didn't think I was attractive enough. What a career limiting move, right? So these stories that we tell ourselves from all those years back, right? I remember when I was 18 years old outside at a club, and I felt I looked really good and I was feeling good about myself, and these group of guys drove by and yelled out fat ass. To this day, that comment has tormented me. I don't think I have a good butt because of those guys in a car. Whereas my fiance, he's constantly telling me how much he loves my butt. And you know what? That means the world to me because I am damaged from when I was 18 years old on the corner of that street in front of that phone booth that those guys said that. This is what happens. Our life, you've all lived these things that have happened that have hurt us or helped us, and it's how we show up today.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Anyone else, please?
Oh, Monica?
Thank you so much, first of all, Carolyn, Linda, and Laura, to put it all together. Like, I feel like I'm in the right place today because over the past 1 year, I have started investing in myself and started to give myself that love. And like, who am I from the inside out? I have started that journey. God, it's tough, really. It's very tough. And so I just started keeping a journal, anything that's positive and that resonates with me, I write it down. And then when I'm really down, I just flip a page that is always going to give me a positive message about myself. So that's my strategy of dealing with it. And one that caught my attention lately is fear and faith.
Mm.
So both are unknown. Faith is unknown, fear is also something unknown. So we have the choice, like, so I go with faith.
I
And
love
then
that.
So that are some of the tools that I use. But I was listening to you, and yes, the trauma thing, because the reason I started this was I would get angry very fast,
Mm.
very fast. And no matter how hard I try, I cannot hide it from my face. Like there's no
Yes.
way people will not know that I'm angry. And that's a very ugly face to look at. Even I wouldn't want to look at it. So but one day it just struck me, like, why am I so angry? And that's when I started digging, like, what is making me so angry? And then I found a few causes. I feel like I need to sit down with someone who can go dig deeper because I had a lovely childhood. Like my parents thought we were limitless. And I think that's where I get my mindset that, as you said, like, we have 53 is just 20-year-old with a 30-year experience.
That's right.
So I
That's
like
right.
that because we are just discovering ourselves, and that's okay. I'm late, but it depends on what you define late, right? I am early because I have a long way to go. But that anger, the trauma, things that stays with us, it's very, very hard to get rid of.
Yes.
Very, very hard. Like trying meditation. Every day I say I will focus on those affirmations, but even like before the 5 minutes, it's a 20-minute affirmation meditation, and by the 5 minutes, my brain is like somewhere else, and the affirmations are somewhere else.
Yes.
So those things, thoughts keep coming back. So I think
And I think the key here, Monica, is to figure out when triggered, do you fight, flight, or freeze? So, for instance, in the story that I talked about with the students, when people are dishonest with me, I get angry. I fight. Okay. However, when someone triggers me and my insecurities, I go weak. So each trigger is different. So figuring out what our triggers are, what truly triggers us. And when I ask audiences this, you might know what triggers you at home because you're triggered a lot at home, but do you know what triggers you at work? Right?
I figured, sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
No, but if you can get on in front of the trigger, right? That's the problem that I had in the class. I didn't realize I was triggered, and I just stomped in not knowing that I was triggered, and I just appeared angry. And it was only when I pressed pause that I took a moment to rest and digest and look from above and go, wow, what the hell is this actor, Carolyn, in this film doing to these poor 35 students that are brave enough to do the assignment? No, I realize that's not who I am. I'm not a mean person. And so what you need to figure out is when triggered, where do you go? And one of the most fascinating things that my fiance taught me this year, because I've lost my mother, who was my best friend, my anchor, my roommate, my everything. And I'm feeling a lot of grief. But you know what he said to me? He said, your grief is showing up as anger. I had no idea. I had no idea that living with me, I appeared angry because I'm not angry. I'm sad. I'm sad. I miss her terribly. But what I realized is because I lost her, we had no idea she had cancer. And in 13 days, I lost her once we found out. I just feel like I'm grabbing onto anything. And I'm so scared of losing things that I'm so angry and trying to control things so that they appear. I had no idea. So his honesty opened my eyes to how I'm showing up. So if you have people in your life, Monica, that can tell you the wake that you're leaving behind, and that you'll be listening to it and not defensive about it. As soon as he told me, wow, you're angry, I'm like, wow, I need to show up different because I'm not feeling anger. I'm feeling sadness.
No, and exactly that was one of the triggers when I showed up, like there were some not very great stories about leadership that I praised myself and saying, this is happening like to me too often. What is it? And then I saw that, like, as you said, dishonesty, for me, it was like taking advantage of. And then I said, like this, so why is people taking advantage of me, triggering me so much? And then I go back and find out, oh, I see, this is where it started. Like I was being like intentionally taken advantage of, and then, so that made me very sad. And now this sadness is triggering anger and the cycle and all of that. So now trying to differentiate that, no, like trying to be mindful of what my emotions are for that particular situation is
Yes.
helping me.
Yes.
Yeah. And also when people are talking to me, I just heard it 2 days ago. So I remember two. They said there are three ways of communication. One is purposeful communication, one is emotional communication, and I can't remember the third one. So when people are talking, pay attention whether it's the purpose communication or an emotional, which was so amazing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank
Gina,
you, Monica. That's amazing feedback and for sharing and being so vulnerable in this call. I know those are not easy things to share. And Carolyn for talking about this. So
but guess what? We're all a work in progress.
We are a work in progress.
Time.
Yes.
Listen, I've been studying this for 25 years, and a year ago I walked into my emotional intelligence class and got mad at the wrong kids. Like, listen, we gotta laugh at ourselves
We
too.
do.
Right? Like, we're work in progress and a masterpiece all at the same time. Gina, you had your hand.
Thank you.
I was just gonna say it reminds me, this whole concept of emotional intelligence and how we're putting feelings that are not other people's or taking on feelings that don't belong to us. And I like this visual of the jelly beans. And I use this with my kids,
Mm.
which is these are my jelly beans. And I don't, if I'm angry one morning because something happened that has nothing to do, I'm not giving, these are not your jelly beans. Let me just take those back.
Mm.
And so, keeping in mind the visual of if my output is anger towards somebody who doesn't, I try to remember, okay, hold on a second. I'm throwing the jelly beans in the wrong direction. I've got to hang
Right.
them back. I'm going to put them
That's
back
right.
in my pocket. And so,
That's right.
so I'm really liking, how you have this easy 6 steps to keep the jelly
Not
beans.
simple, not easy. Let's be clear. Simple,
Oh, I
not
was saying
easy.
that
Yes,
sarcastically.
yes, yes, yes.
But yeah, no, this is fantastic.
Yes. And the first step really is the hardest one, which
Yeah.
is we got to look at ourselves and do the assessment and kind of where do I fall? And the biggest aha for me was wow, once I realized that I was so needy. And interestingly enough, for years with therapists, I would talk about the story, right? Why I got into this predicament, why I was fighting, angry at my father. It was always the story, but it was never about the skills that I was lacking that got me into that predicament. This emotional intelligence would have saved me thousands of dollars and years of therapy because what EI does is it focuses on what you think your skill level is at. Some of you are too high, some of you are too low. It's about figuring out when we've swung too far and not far enough, right? Like self-regard. Let's take self-regard. Are you confident and sure of yourself and love who you are, warts and all? Or are you insecure? Or are you on the dark side? Are you a narcissist and never admit mistakes? It's figuring out where you are in each of these 15 continuums and then figuring out, okay, where do I need to lower my emotional intelligence and where do I need to increase my emotional intelligence? And it's just like muscles at the gym. I call these emotional muscles. We have 15 of them. Some of them are underutilized, some of them are overutilized, and some of them are just right. You've got to figure out what exercise regime works for you. Because if I said to Heather, let's say Heather lacked empathy, I'd give her different strategies than I would Jody, who might have too much empathy. It's about figuring out where your default is and then where do you want to go? Because when I wrote this book, when it first came out, I was on all these television shows and all the talk shows wanted to like, what's the quick way to get emotionally intelligent? There is no quick fix. It's about figuring out where you are, figuring out who you're working with and where they are, and then figuring out what's the best strategy. And you've got to know what your default is to begin with. What's your baseline? Anyone else?
I just want to say a quick thing about triggers. I liken it to values as I think about it. Like, it's my values that it's coming up against. So, but anyway, I just wanted to say how lovely it is to see you 20 years later and see where you've evolved to. And it's amazing. I was so excited when I saw your book and your tour and all the things that have been happening.
Oh, wonderful.
So,
Thank you,
it's
Sheila.
a delight to follow your journey. And
Oh,
I look forward to seeing you again someday in a live
yes, for
room somewhere.
sure. For sure, for sure. And I'm so glad you brought up values because that is really what it is. Dishonesty. Honesty is a huge value of mine. That's why I'm triggered when people are dishonest,
Yeah.
right? So if we can determine what our values are, and by the way, values are our guiding principles, right? It's like our GPS. What are the things that really matter to you? And then as leaders, are you letting your people know what really matters to you? So one of the things, the biggest mistake that I made as a leader is I just assumed, right? Again, I teach leadership and I've been doing that for 25 years. I think we have this fallacy that we have to treat everyone the same because we're leaders. No, you don't treat everyone the same. You treat them depending on their skill and motivation for each task. You have to treat them differently. Each person needs different things. But I think figuring out what's important to you and then letting your team know what's important to you. So I always say to my students, unfortunately for you, I'm the one evaluating you. You might not like how I evaluate you, but that's what matters. Well, you are all, as leaders, you're all teachers. You got to tell your class what a good job looks like to you. And so, Jody, if you've got a team or direct reports of 5 or 10, you've got to tell your class of 5 or 10 what a good job looks like for you. And that means what's the rubric? What are you marking them on? If attention to detail is important to you, then that's what you're grading them on. If being optimistic is important to you because you hate negativity, that's what you're grading them on. Great thing. Figuring out what you value will determine what triggers you have.
Thank you for closing with that, Carolyn, because I think it's all about values and understanding that my values might be different from yours. And therein is the rub, right? Often therein lies the rub. So thank you. If you look in the chat, there are many rounds of applause already for you and for this session. We love your spirit. We love your energy and the emotion that you brought to this call, and all of the focus on our own emotions and watching our triggers and paying attention to the emotions of others as well, and the importance of that. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you to all of you who were on the call. I think that, Laura, do we have a feedback piece to put in here today, or
not today? We'll
invite
send it
people
out
for feedback? So we'd love your feedback. Any comments you'd want to make in the chat, please put them in. We'll send you a feedback form in with the slide deck, with all of the information on how to contact Carolyn so that it's easy for you to reach out. She does sessions, she's a coach, she's a speaker, she's everywhere, and she's a fabulous author. So pick up the book if you haven't already read it, and check out the other services she offers. And who knows, we might have her back sometime when she writes that second book that was waiting
that
for
second
her,
book
right?
is actually happening as we speak, Linda.
Okay, so it's a date.
That's the date.
We will be in conversation.
Yes. And please, everyone, please reach out to me, Carolyn at carolynstern.com. I have 2 websites. Carolynstern.com is my speaking website if you want to have me come to your company and do like a keynote presentation. But EI Experience is where we do all our corporate training. So if you're interested in having me come in, do some training sessions with your leaders, or coaching sessions, assessments, I'll tell you, the EQ assessment saved my life. It's what made me go, wow, now I know why I am the way I am. And that's what I try to give you in the book, is to get you to do an assessment of yourself. And that's the beginning step of your emotional journey.
And Heather posted earlier in her in the chat that was one of the first books she read as a coach. And for me, it was as well. So interesting.
Oh,
We're all on the
great. I'm
same
so
page.
glad.
It's a group of like-minded people for sure today.
Yes.
So, yeah. So if you enjoyed the conversation today, check out readersofthepack.com. We have booked through until September at this stage, I think, with more to come. And this year, our focus has been on women authors, and we're just having a blast with it. It's been so much fun. Most of our audience are often women, and so we are looking for ways to help women in leadership, for sure, with intention. If you love learning like this in conversation, we love hosting our leadership learning labs internally for internal teams. So you can choose the book of choice and be in conversation over 4 or 5 sessions, whatever you choose. and dig a little deeper as a team, which is really fun. We hope you're excited about 2025, and here's wishing you much success as you live your dreams. Learn, laugh, and love. Thank you all for joining us, and we're now signing off for our Author Speak series with Carolyn Stern, our second Author Speak interview of 2025. It's going fast. And reach out at any time. We're here, and please reach out to Carolyn.